What's up, guys? Toad back with you. Another morning, Wednesday morning, Tower Gang Wednesday. Be there tonight for a new Tower Gang. 1-1 yesterday. Obviously, not really what I wanted. I mean, it's a slightly losing day, but it is what it is. Marquette was a nice, easy win in college basketball. College basketball is starting to turn it around a little bit after a really ugly start. I think we're kind of at least getting in the groove there. But college football, I mean, it was due to happen at some point on a 13-1 run. You knew I was going to lose at some point. So I did lose Northern Illinois last night. I thought it was a good spot, and a spot where Miami, Ohio really might be looking ahead to a game that is really the game that's going to decide their season against Bowling Green next week. But Northern Illinois just couldn't get anything done in that game. And I forgot to mention Northern Illinois' running back, like their best running back, has been injured the last couple weeks basically, but it hasn't really impacted their running game that much, so I didn't think it mattered that much. But their offense got nothing done in that game. It was an under. I mentioned that I thought the under made sense in that game too, with two good defenses, but I didn't play it, unfortunately. Moving on to today, I mean, this card, we have college basketball, we have NBA, NHL, and more MACtion, and I hate the card, and I'm landing on one of the MACtion games where I think it's similar to last night. I think it's a situational spot that kind of makes sense, a motivational angle, and that's my only play today, as my mic stand does not want to hold up here. Who do we got in the comments? Scott, what's up, my man? Nephilim Death Squad, what's up, man? Is that Top or is it Raven? My guess is it's Raven, but I don't know. It's usually Raven. I'm pretty sure that's Raven. Let's get into it, man. I don't think there's a whole lot that I'm going to break down here, but college basketball, I mean, kind of just like yesterday, I kind of mentioned these ridiculous sandwich spots that exist, but again, at least half of the favorites seem to just cover these anyway because they're such the better team that they could just kind of dominate. I mean, I was looking at this and thinking, well, this is not a sandwich spot really, but I was thinking Yale, maybe they're in a bad spot here because it's a second straight road game. They just played a step-up game against a Big Ten team in Minnesota and almost pulled off the upset, even though Minnesota, not a very good Big Ten team. And Yale does have a Battle of Connecticut up next against Fairfield, although Fairfield might kind of take that game more seriously than Yale does, because I think Fairfield is probably, they consider themselves to be the little brother in Southern Connecticut there, but I don't really know. I mean, because Yale is at least an Ivy. But this game, Yale, I mean, they shot out of their minds, man. 50% from three in this game, even though they did lose the turnover battle disgustingly. Minnesota only shot 17.6% from three. These are some real outlier percentages here, and Yale was winning pretty much the whole game by a decent amount, and their lead just kind of slipped away, and then they lost. Well, pretty much the first half, at least, they were ahead. So does Yale bounce back after that? I don't know, man. Yale's down from 10.5 to 10, laying a lot of points here against a Stony Brook team that they might not be paying a whole lot of attention to. So that would be the way I would lean, and that one would be to taking the points with Stony Brook, but I'm not doing it. But, I mean, I just want better spots in college basketball, man. Stony Brook's coming off a nice game where they kind of were able to maybe get some new momentum back, beating up on a non-Division I team. They haven't faced the easiest schedule, playing Marquette and George Mason, but, I mean, both of those teams completely annihilated them. So, I don't know. I don't know if Stony Brook is really actually any good at all. Maybe they're not. I mean, they're getting 10 points at home, so how good could they really be? What else is going on here? Dayton, I thought, might be in kind of an interesting potential fade spot just because it's a big look-ahead spot to North Carolina, which is going to be one of their bigger games of the season. So potentially they might overlook New Mexico State. And Dayton, at the very least, even though they're called the Flyers, they play a really ugly, slow style of game right now. So that's not as conducive to covering a huge number, like a 14.5-point spread like this. New Mexico State hasn't really faced anybody yet. Their best win is this one over Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Take from that what you will, I guess. What games am I even talking about? Yeah, New Mexico State and Dayton. Dayton is up from 13 to 14.5, though, so I don't know. And I forgot to zoom in on this, so pardon me there. Xerox, what's up, man? Yeah, I always bet wrong. Yeah, this is it's for the atmosphere, man. That's why we do this. Yeah, I should actually. I'll start using Descript for better off dead. But it's really tough when it's a daily show, man. And then you got, Penn State. Just to kind of look at just running down these games quickly, really, because I'm not playing any of these. But Penn State, they just played Virginia Tech, so they are coming off a nice win that might have them feeling a little bit high on themselves, and now they step down in class and face IPFW, Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne, which these names are ridiculous, man. And IUPUI changed their name. Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis changed their name to, I don't even remember what the hell it is. I think they're just IU Indianapolis now or something. I don't know what it is, whatever. IPFW, they're not a bad team, but Penn State, they really like to run. So this is a pacing collision here. So if Penn State is able to run like up tempo at home, IPFW may have some difficulty there because they do not want to play fast. So again, skipping it. Skip all of these, man. The entire college basketball slate is a pussy, basically. Penn State's up from 14 to 14.5. But I'm telling you how I break these games down, man. This is how my mind kind of thinks about these. Virginia Tech, debatably, they're in a sandwich spot, man, between two Big Ten teams here, losing to Penn State in that game I just mentioned, which ended their undefeated season. They won 3 games, big deal. Although Winthrop is actually a pretty good team. But sometimes when you lose that first loss, it does hang you over, man. If they're not paying attention to Jacksonville's not like the worst team out there, really. And they do have Michigan, Vandy, Pitt up next. So this is sandwiched in between a bunch of bigger games. So, and the line is actually not big here, kind of indicating that really this is not a major mismatch, really, with this being 11.5 or whatever. So could potentially look to play the Jacksonville side here. Jacksonville broke their losing streak by beating South Carolina State, and not by a lot. A game they probably should have won by more. Well, maybe. They were a 6.5-point favorite, but seems like a game that Jacksonville was the significantly better team in that game. Jacksonville, their 2 losses, you can't really blame them for losing to Florida, even though it is an in-state bigger brother. Florida's a significantly better team, and then Furman is also a very good program in the SoCon right now. So I lean against Virginia Tech here. Virginia Tech, I don't know if they're really that good this year either. The line is kind of indicating that they're not necessarily, but they are up from 10 to 11. So Jacksonville may be one of the stronger of those plays that I'm mentioning here. West Virginia also kind of in a sandwich. They just lost a Pitt in the basketball edition of the Backyard Brawl, the basketball brawl. And they do have Gonzaga up next, although it's not for a week, but that is a significantly bigger game than this game sitting here against Iona, even though Iona is usually one of the better teams in the MAC. Iona not off to a good start, but they did play Princeton, which is not an easy game. They only lost by 1. And then I thought that put them in kind of a hangover spot because they played really well against Princeton, and they lost to Hofstra. So I won money on that one. Hofstra, pretty good team as well. So Iona's not really had an easy schedule, and Delaware's not even really that bad either. I think they're still in the Colonial along with Hofstra there. And then Iona won their last game against Vermont. Vermont, man, they're off to a bad start. Vermont, they might be down this year. I don't know, because they're lined like they're still the top team in the American East and whatever, but they've been losing a lot of games. So I don't know. So maybe that's considered to be a big win for Iona, though. So I don't know. Will they be able to go out on the road to Morgantown and maintain an effort like that? I don't want to bank on it, really, but West Virginia, I think, is in the worst spot here as they, well, like I already pointed it out, they're sandwiched in between Pitt and Gonzaga there. So, but West Virginia, they're up from 13 to 14.5, so some line movement coming in on the West Virginia side there as well. And then Texas A&M also, I think, is kind of a bad spot here. They just won in a ranked matchup against Ohio State. Pretty big win for Texas A&M. Texas A&M, as I mentioned, they've been shooting up in the KenPom rankings, shooting up like a drug addict. They were like 60th to start the season in KenPom rankings, and I'm like, man, the college basketball polls seem like they're way off, but I guess they weren't, because Texas A&M is already up to like 15 in KenPom's rankings. And they also have bigger games up next against Oregon, Creighton, Wake, Texas Tech, Purdue. All these games are bigger than a game against Southern. Are they really going to take Southern seriously in this game? Probably not. And the other benefit that you get here is that Texas A&M plays very slow, very ugly. And I think if they're anything like last year, they're also not very good at hitting three-pointers either. So Texas A&M, not very equipped offensively to cover like giant spreads, but when they're playing a team that they're way better than, like Southern, who also is pretty bad offensively, you never really know. But the spot looks like Texas A&M could just overlook Southern, and for Southern, it's a step-up game for them, and it is an in-state little brother, I think, for Southern. So this is one of the biggest games on their entire schedule, so they may step it up effort-wise for this game, but I don't know if it'll be enough just because it's such a mismatch talent-wise here. But Southern, they finally won a game, man, after they lost 3 games to start the season. One of them was against Iowa, so you can't really blame them for that. But, I mean, South Dakota and East Texas A&M, formerly Texas A&M Commerce, not great teams, but Southern, I mean, they're in one of the lower conferences here, one of the worst conferences, the SWAC. Even though they're usually one of the better teams in the SWAC, what can you really expect? They finally won a game against Ecclesia, whoever the hell that is, some non-Division I team, but that might help start some momentum for them at least coming into this game. So I would not lay the points with Texas A&M in this one at the very least. So at the very least, if you're planning on doing that, it'll keep you off of doing that. A&M is up from 26 to 26.5. I mean, it is a huge mismatch, like I said. No, Scott, you're going to miss it. Maybe you can get Wi-Fi on the plane, man, and try to tune in. We're skipping everything here. We're skipping everything I'm talking about until I get to college football, where my one play is, and it's purely a motivational play. And then I will talk about the one big game that's on the slate here for college basketball. Though also I'll say Little Rock could be in a bad spot here, as even though they did finally win a game here in Division I against UTSA after losing to Winthrop, who is actually pretty good. Arkansas State, I mean, they were a kind of dangerous team last year that kind of flew under the radar, so I don't know. But they have a big game next against Big Brother Arkansas, so possible they overlook Tulsa, but maybe not, because Tulsa's kind of a bigger team than them too in the American Athletic there, I think is where they're at. So Tulsa also sitting at 3-1, so maybe it's still a game that Little Rock might show up for. Tulsa's also they are coming off like a barn burner against Missouri State that went into 3 overtimes, and they have Loyola Chicago up next. So on Tulsa's side, they might overlook Little Rock too. So I'm not getting involved in that one either. Tulsa's up from 9 to 12 though, so it looks like there is actually significant money coming in on the Tulsa side. These college basketball lines, man, a lot of these early season lines move a lot. And then to finish out just my discussion on college basketball, we have one ranked matchup here against Illinois and Alabama. And this could be a game with a lot of scoring, man, because both of these teams, kind of just like last year, they like to run. They like to go up tempo. They like to score. Illinois, actually, at least so far this season, seems to be a little bit less inept defensively than they were last year. Alabama, maybe not quite as much. Alabama's defense maybe a little bit worse than that. Illinois hasn't really played anybody yet, though. So how can you really take away anything from them beating Eastern Illinois, SIU, Edwardsville, and then Oakland? I don't really know. But this is going to be their first big step-up game here against Alabama. This is a neutral site game as well in the CM Newton Classic. All these ridiculous in-season these in-season tournaments, I guess, early season tournaments. It's actually semi-home for Alabama because it's in Birmingham, Alabama. So take away from that what you will. Alabama is being lined pretty much like they're almost the home team here, in my opinion, looking at what this line is. Alabama, I mean, they've played a somewhat more difficult schedule because all of these teams are actually fairly good, like mid-major teams. UNC Asheville, they absolutely completely wiped them out. Arkansas State, like I said, not really a bad team. And McNeese, we know they're a pretty good team as they were last year. McNeese, they're not off to a great start because they've been facing some pretty difficult opponents, man. So I don't know. And then Alabama lost to Purdue in their first big game of the season. And now, is that going to maybe hang them over into the next game? I think it is possible. And even though they're facing a ranked team here, I mean, look what they have up next in 6 days. They have Houston. And that's like one of those early season matchups. It's like a top 10 matchup between a couple of the top teams. And then they do have Rutgers and then UNC. And all of those games are actually maybe slightly bigger than Illinois. Well, I don't know if they're really going to consider Rutgers to be that big, though. But Houston up next, definitely a big game. So it is possible they overlook Illinois, who's kind of like just cracked into the rankings here. But it is still a Big Ten team, a big team in Illinois. So I don't know if they're really going to totally overlook them. But Alabama has gone up from 4.5 to 8.5. And I think at this point, the line is just out of control. I don't really know what is the cause for the line move. If Illinois has injuries, it's really difficult to tell. I mean, you could probably look into it and figure it out if there are injuries in this game, because it is a Big Ten against an SEC team. So it is a big game. So the injury report is probably out there for this one. But I don't know if it's injuries driving this line or if it's really just actual market movement driving that line up, because it looks like it's gone too far to me. I would only take the points with Illinois in that one. The line looks like it's too high on that one. But if it's going to be a high-scoring game, and it looks like it is, the total's up to 167.5. I mean, that is a high college basketball total, man. So I don't know. The higher the total, the easier it is to cover a large number as a favorite. Let's move on to NHL. We'll look at NHL next. I don't even know where to begin on this one, but I mean, a couple of leans, I guess. The spot for Toronto, I think, doesn't look that great. Vegas, I mean, they're starting a road trip, and they've had a couple days off, and they're coming off an ugly loss to Washington, even though Washington's been playing quite well this season. It may help them to have a couple days off and then go out on the road. A couple of things they're going to focus you, man, are when you have a couple of days off after a loss to kind of recollect yourselves, and you go out on the road and you start a road trip against a team that is a decent team. Those things are going to focus you, man. So I kind of like the Vegas side in this one. Toronto, and they may still be focused, though, because it is a big opponent in Vegas coming into their place. They've had a bunch of days off, too, but I think their days off are maybe going to hurt them a little bit because they had some momentum, and they just beat Washington. So the public might come in and look at this and think, wait a minute, Toronto just beat Washington, although it was in overtime, but it was on the road, whereas Vegas just lost to them 5-2 at home. So you're basically just giving me a line, pick the winner here pretty much. I got to take Toronto, right? And I think Toronto's actually they're a slight favorite here, but it almost looks easy to take Toronto here. So I disagree with taking Toronto here. And those are big games. They're coming off of 2 overtime wins against Washington and Edmonton, even though this is also a big game against Vegas. So I don't know if I quite want to do it, but that time off would have me leaning to the Vegas side, who I think it's almost like the same thing that you look at when you look at a football bye, teams that go into that on a good note, that can kind of stop their momentum. Teams that go into it on a bad note, they can kind of refocus themselves. So I like Vegas in this one. If I was going to play this, Toronto's down from -131 to -124. Don't really see anything from the percentages yet, but that would be the way that I would look in that one. Nashville at Seattle. My read on this was that Nashville is not really in a great spot here as they're coming up beating Vancouver. They're about to finish the road trip here, but they may consider this. This may almost be a sandwich spot, man, even though I know they lost the first 3 games of the road trip. Those are tough games against Colorado and Edmonton, and then I played against them in this Calgary game because I thought that was a sandwich spot. They played badly. They got shut out, and then coming into the next game, they won against Vancouver. Now, they do have a couple of days off, but they're facing Seattle coming off that big win, and then they got Winnipeg and New Jersey up next. So those are bigger games, man, than the Seattle game is. So it is possible they kind of overlook Seattle, who's been hovering around 500, basically, although I don't know if Nashville can afford to really overlook anybody, but beating Vancouver is a decent deal there. My one problem with looking towards the Seattle side is that they just lost their win streak, man. They had a nice 4-game win streak, although some of it was against not great teams, but they did beat Vegas in there. But then they lost to the New York Rangers, and that's a step-up game, man. You step up your game whenever you play the New York Rangers, and they only lost 2-0, although Seattle did have their second-string goalie, Grubauer, in net for that one. So Decord is going to be well-rested and coming back into this game for Seattle, I would imagine. So a little bit of an edge for Seattle there with Decord back in there instead of Grubauer. That will help them a little bit. So I do still lean to the Seattle side, but coming off that Ranger game, I don't really know that I necessarily want to do it. And LA up next is also kind of a bigger game as well. The Kings have been playing pretty well. Nashville still continues to be a little bit under the radar, and I think they're better than the record looks. Nashville up from -125 to -129, but I would look to grab the underdog price with Seattle if I was going to play that one. Especially, I mean, you're getting an underdog price at home. That also doesn't look that bad. Oh, and by the way, my Bruins, they fired their coach yesterday, and prior to entering the arena for the Celtics game, one of the local sports stations, one of the local news stations, TV News, was out there doing their sports report, and they were interviewing people about the coaching change, and they interviewed me, and they never aired my segment, man. I thought I was going to be on the news last night on NBC Boston, whichever channel it was. I put it on, and I watched the segment, and they didn't have me. Not only did they not have me, but my reaction I thought was kind of awesome, man, because I didn't know that the coach had been fired yet, and my reaction was, yes, good move. Like, a lot of this is his fault. Let's make a change. Let's spark the team. I talked about the fired coach spot, which I might bet on the Bruins tomorrow, man, potentially, because of the fired coach spot. But they didn't even air my segment, and I thought I was kind of funny. I thought it was at least weird enough that it was going to be one of those segments where they kind of thought, hey, we have to put this guy on just because this is so weird. But no, they didn't do it. And not only did they not do it, but I watched that segment, and all of the people that they showed were against the firing, because the Bruins, Montgomery, of course, was their coach when they won the President's Trophy, and he was their coach last year, so 2 good seasons for the Bruins. But again, I mean, President's Trophy, and you lose in the first round. Last year, they lost again and really didn't seem to have much heart in the playoffs. I think that does go to the coach, even though they had good regular seasons those 2 years. Get him out of there, man, and see what can happen. And their new coach, his name is Sacco. So what could be better than that, man? The Bruins, you want to avoid the Sacco Trophy like in the league. You don't want to come in last place. The league, the show, the FX fantasy football comedy show, if you don't know what I'm talking about. Great show, actually. Hilarious show. But you don't want to get the Sacco prize, so you bring in Sacco as your coach, man. But they did not air my segment, and all the people that they did air were against the firing, being like, why did they do this? Who the hell is this Sacco guy? It's the news media, man. They refuse to offer dissenting opinions. I was the dissenting opinion saying this is good that they fired their coach, and they don't even air my perspective. They don't air the opposing perspective. Man, the corporate press is the enemy of the people, man. NBA, we got an interesting slate of games here, man, and I'm not playing any of these, but man, I mean, Cleveland, I would look to go against Cleveland because we know what happened last night. They lost to the Boston Celtics, the game I was at. Fun game. I mean, the Celtics should have won that game way more easily. The Celtics were dominating that game throughout the middle of the game. The Celtics, after they were losing 4-3 early in the game, they took the lead and never surrendered it, even though it got close. They let a 21-point lead slip to 2 in the third quarter, but the Celtics never surrendered the lead, man. It was basically a wire-to-wire win for the Celtics. There were stretches in that game where they were completely dominant, and then it was just Cleveland was just not missing shots through that stretch where they cut the lead down. But, man, I mean, nice win for the Celtics. That ends Cleveland's undefeated streak, so that could put you in a huge hangover spot, man, on a back-to-back in a third game in 4 days, and there's travel because they went out to Boston and now they're returning home. This is a bad spot for Cleveland, man. So why am I not doing this? Why am I not taking the points with New Orleans? I mean, I would look that way. I kind of want to, but man, I mean, it just looks so bad when you lose your undefeated season. That alone can hang you over into the next game. You can lose that game twice, but you do it against the returning champs in a huge step-up game, and you make this huge comeback and put in a huge effort in the game. The game gets physical at the end. I mean, Donovan Mitchell got hit in the face near the end on a rough foul from Tatum at the end there. I was just like, don't call this a flagrant, please. So he was bloodied up a little bit there, but he was fine. I mean, he stayed in the game and made the free throws and whatever. I think he made them both. I don't know. He did miss one a little bit before that. New Orleans, the reason why I don't really want to jump in on this, although New Orleans, they played yesterday too, though, so they're also playing a back-to-back, kind of difficult, but they got absolutely annihilated by Dallas. The problem I have with this is that was a good spot to fade Dallas. As I mentioned on my show yesterday, Dallas I thought was in a sandwich spot there in New Orleans. Not only did they just kind of not show up, but man, they just got absolutely wrecked. But maybe that means they're going to bounce back here because no team wants to be embarrassed like this. You just lost by 41 points. You lose by 41 to anybody, you're going to bounce back. So I mean, Pelicans, they're the team that I would look to in this game. But then the other issue is we don't know what the hell the injury situation is going to be in this game. And CJ McCollum has been slated to come back this week for a while. It looks like he is scheduled to come back in this game. I don't know that he is. He's one of the Pelicans' best players. They're still going to be without Zion Williamson, who's not even listed on the injury report. So I don't know. Does that mean he's out for the season now? I don't even know. And DeJounte Murray is a big piece too, and he's not going to come back yet. But if McCollum comes back, yes, it's going to help the Pelicans, but it also is going to be an injured player spot if he comes back, where the Pelicans will get a little bit less value. But I guess the injured player spot means a little bit less in a game like this, though, and you have Cleveland is just a giant favorite in the game. So what is it going to do? Move the line from like 13 to 11? I mean, whatever. You're still getting a ton of points with the Pelicans. That is the way that I would lean. I'm not going to quite get there with this one, but I like the Pelicans side in this one. I think it's a really bad spot for Cleveland, and it's just unfortunate that they're not playing a more competitive opponent here and a more intact opponent here. Cavs are down from 14 to 13.5. 74% of tickets and 88% of the cash on them, though. But lean to the Pelicans in that one anyway. Also lean against the Milwaukee Bucks. This is a game where at least the injury situation, I think, is less crazy. I think Giannis is still in there. I mean, he played their last game. Lillard was in there too. So I think Milwaukee is at least an intact team right now. But they're coming off what's now a nice win, man, over Houston. Houston's been playing well this season. So that's a big win, pretty big win. Milwaukee, they've started to play better, winning 3 out of their last 4. But all those games were against bad teams. Now they finally beat an actual pretty good team in Houston. But now they step back down in class and they face Chicago, and they might overlook Chicago because who do they have up next? The Indiana Pacers, and that's the team that ended Milwaukee's season last year, man. And this is the first time they face Indiana since then. Milwaukee's going to have that game circled, man. Anytime you face the team that ended your season last year, you're going to want that game. So I think Milwaukee might be in a sandwich spot here and look past Chicago. So I lean to Chicago here. Milwaukee's laying 8 points, 73% of the tickets, 75 now, and 89% of the cash on the side of the Bulls. So the Bulls look like a public underdog, though, which I think is because of the team's records, because Milwaukee's record is just so bad. It's like laying 8 points with Milwaukee. What the hell? So that's another thing that gives me a little bit of pause, is just that the spread, it almost makes it look too easy to take the points with the Bulls here, because the Bulls actually have the better record and they're getting a ton of points. So from the public perspective, it almost looks easy to take them, but we do still see that more of the cash is coming in than the tickets on the Bulls. The situation, I think, is still a spot where the taking the points with the Bulls does make sense. Bulls are coming off a win over Detroit, which Detroit has been playing pretty decently this year, but still, I mean, it's a win over Detroit. I don't know that you're going to really you're not going to really be in a letdown spot or anything like that after that. And you're playing Giannis, man, so you're probably going to still step it up for a game against Giannis. Johnny, what's up, man? Yeah, all degenerate gamblers, stop doing what you're doing, man. Why are you doing this to yourselves? Don't do it. Philadelphia, Memphis. I'm just going to point out some of these games. This is an interesting line, man. It was 3.5 earlier, but now it's 2.5. It was 2.5 with juice. It went up to 3.5. Now it's down to 2.5. Sixers are actually public. How? I don't know. 67% of the tickets, 71% of the cash. Maybe just because everybody knows Embiid is back and Maxey may come back in this game. But I look at this and I think this is a misleading spread, man. And yes, the Sixers do have more of the cash coming in on them. And I would actually lean potentially to the Sixers side in this one just because the line looks so ridiculous. I mean, scheduling spot-wise, I think it is maybe a little bit of a worse spot for Memphis as well, because they're coming off a bunch of big games, man. Step-up games. They lost to the Lakers by 5, Golden State by 5, both on the road. And then they beat Denver, and then they lost to Denver. As I mentioned yesterday, that was a zigzag for Denver. And I don't even know if Jokic came back in that game because he was out for personal reasons. Did he play last night? He did not. So Denver beat them in the zigzag without Jokic, but Memphis is coming off a bunch of big games like that, even though, yeah, they did lose by double digits in that next game. But they're playing a third game in 4 days now, though. It is all at home, so that can kind of mitigate it a little bit. But playing this Philadelphia team that just looks awful, but they don't have anything big up next, going to Chicago. Not a huge deal, but mostly what I was looking at is Philadelphia is a road favorite in this game, and they're 2-11 up against an 8-7 team. Like, how could you possibly have a team that's laying points like this on the road as a 2-11 team? Well, it's because the odds makers are telling you this 76ers team, they're still a talented team, man, and they have been in disarray all season. They've been without Joel Embiid for almost the entire season. Maxey has been out. They have not had a single game with both of those guys on the floor together. So this could be a spot where maybe Philly will actually show up. And they got kind of embarrassed in the last game against Miami. I think they got to show up at some point, man. But the problem is it going to be a reverse injured player spot because Maxey's going to come back? This line seems to indicate that he probably is coming back here. And Kyle Lowry's not coming back yet. But Maxey is a big piece here. He's kind of the glue for the Sixers at this point, man. So it should help with him back, obviously. But his first game back where he and Embiid have to play together, I'm a little bit worried about that. If I was going to try to play the Sixers here, I would be worried that the team is still in disarray. And it seems like Maxey and Embiid are not really getting along. Maxey seems kind of angry that Embiid is like not putting in full effort and stuff. So I would be a little bit worried about that. So I don't know. So it's not going to be one I'm going to get involved in, but the line looks so suspicious for Philly to be laying points like this on the road. The odds makers still telling you that the Sixers do still have talent on this team. But if it's that reverse injured player spot with Maxey coming back and the team has to regain that chemistry and whatever, I don't really want to do it, man. I don't want to do it. OKC is on a back-to-back. I will just point that out. They lost to the Spurs last night. Huge win for the Spurs. Spurs in the in-season tournament, their stupid tournament. But OKC, even though that means they're on a back-to-back, are they going to step it up because they lost to the Spurs? I don't know, because they put in a full effort to try to still win that game. I had it on TNT, and it was an effort game all the way to the end, so I don't know. So possible Oklahoma City's in a bad rest spot there, but it is also possible they'll be in a bounce-back spot there. So I don't know what to do with that Thunder game. They're down from 13.5 to 12.5, 50% of the tickets and 59% of the cash on the Blazers. So some market indicators on the Blazers. And then we got Knicks-Phoenix. This game, the Knicks are laying a huge price on the road, man, which of course means Kevin Durant is not back yet. The Knicks, they've started winning some games, and of course it was against a very injured Philly team, Brooklyn twice, Washington. So they haven't really beaten any solid opponents yet, but they are starting a road trip. So they're probably going to be focused here. I think this Knicks team is better than what their record indicates, man. And they're the team that has the worst record here, and they're laying 5.5 points on the road. So I think the public's going to look at this and think, we got to take the points with Phoenix, right? Even without Durant, and I think they might be without Beal still. But this, I mean, you got the Phoenix Suns who are off to a hot start this season. They look like they're the better team perception-wise. But the odds makers are telling you, probably even with Durant in the lineup, the Knicks are actually the better team based on how this game is lined. So I don't know, man. Knicks have a few injuries in there too, but the injuries are on the Phoenix side. Durant won't be back. Beal is also still out, like I mentioned. So a lot of injuries on the side of the Phoenix side there, the side of the Suns. So again, not really something I want to get involved in. The Suns have lost 4 games in a row, but Sacramento, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Orlando, all playoff teams from last year. So I don't know. I mean, those are tough matchups, but this is also another playoff team from last year. So I don't know. For the most part, to me, the handicap there comes down to, it looks like a very suspicious line, and it's actually down from 7.5 to 5. It was 6.5 this morning, and now it's down to 5. 71% of the tickets on the Suns, so the public looks like they are coming in on the Suns side, but the cash, even though the line has dropped, the cash percentage does look like it's on the Knicks at 86%, so it looks like maybe a pros versus Joes type of spot there. Emily, what's up? Good to see you. That's right, yeah. Xerox Scott, Johnny, Nephilim Death Squad, a.k.a. The Raven. They're all in the chat right now, man. And Magic Clippers, I'll just run this game quick before I talk about these stupid MAC games and my one play of today. Orlando and the Clippers, I mean, the Clippers, to me, first look at this is the Clippers are in a letdown spot. I mean, they just beat the Golden State Warriors. That's a huge win. Pretty simple. Letdown spot. They're playing an Orlando team where Orlando's without their best players still. Banchero, he's not coming back anytime soon. The Clippers have Sacramento up next, which is another big Western Conference playoff opponent from last year. Are they going to overlook Orlando? It is certainly possible they will, and this is a very inconsistent Clippers team. James Harden, very inconsistent player. Issue is, this is Orlando, this is a train right now, so that would lead you to believe that, yeah, you should again jump on the Orlando side, because do you want to like step in front of this Orlando train right now? They've been playing well for a while now, even without Banchero there. Wagner has really been stepping up his game. This team has been pretty good, although mostly against bad teams. But they're coming off probably their biggest win of the season, maybe, or one of their biggest wins. Yeah, probably the biggest against Phoenix, but it was Phoenix without Durant. So they have beaten some of these teams in kind of injury mode here. It was to start a road trip, so that was a positive spot for Orlando to start a road trip. They do face LeBron tomorrow. So that's the problem I have with this, is that Orlando arguably is also in a sandwich spot here, because out of Phoenix, even though it's Phoenix without Durant, it's the start of a road trip. It's the Phoenix Suns and then LA up next with LeBron. Like, which one of these opponents are you going to overlook? It might be that very inconsistent Clippers team. So I don't think I want to play the Orlando side here either, but Orlando is up from a pick 'em to 2.5. 57% of tickets on them, 55% of the cash on the other side on the Clippers. So some market movement some market indicators that are indicating opposite each other too. So it's opposite day, man. So I don't like it. I'm just going to stay away from it. And I won on the Orlando Magic in one of these games. I think it was that game against the Suns, right? I played Orlando in one of these games. Yeah, I think it probably was. Yeah, because they were coming off a couple of tough games in a row and returning home for a road trip. So Phoenix was in a bad spot in that game against Orlando. So Orlando, multiple factors in their favor in that game that might take a little bit away from that. Might make you pause a little bit on that. Let's look at college football. We got 2 MAC games today, and man, I'll talk about my play first. I guess, because both of these games are at the same time, but it's the first one on the schedule. I'm laying the point with Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan -1 is my play here. My only play of the day, being super selective, and I know I lost. I was 2-0 in MAC games until yesterday, and I lost on Northern Illinois 2-1. Now I lost my 13-1 college football run. I'm not happy about it, but I like the Eastern Michigan side, even though the odds look like, the market looks like it's against it, with Eastern Michigan down from 2.5 to 1, 79% of tickets, 85% of the cash on Buffalo. But Buffalo, I think at least will be a public team because of the way they've been playing recently. If the public is coming in and looking at these games, which they might, because these are the only football games on the slate here, although the other one is much bigger, Ohio and Toledo. But this Buffalo one, this is an interesting situation, man. Buffalo, they're on a nice run right now, but they beat Akron and Ball State, and they had to go into overtime to beat Ball State. So are those really great wins? Probably not. Akron's one of the worst teams in the conference. Ball State, at the very least, has absolutely no defense, even though they can throw the ball. And Ogbonna is kind of throwing the ball all over the place for Buffalo. He's their main dude on offense, but they do run the ball too. Buffalo does have a balanced offense. So this Buffalo team, yeah, they are pretty good offensively, but Ogbonna throwing the ball all over the place. He throws a lot of deep passes, and the problem here is that both of these MAC games today are going to be kind of bad weather and a lot of wind. So the wind might take the wind out of Buffalo's sails a little bit here and might have these throws sailing away from them, even though, yes, they can run the ball. So they are probably going to be running the ball a bit more here. And Eastern Michigan is not very good at defending either. So I am a little bit worried here that Eastern Michigan's defense is bad, but Buffalo's defense is also bad. It's just that Buffalo's offense is a little bit better than Eastern Michigan's is, and Eastern Michigan isn't as balanced. They can't run the ball, really. They can only throw it. But Buffalo, this is all about the situation, man. Buffalo just got their 6th win. That's their bowl eligibility. They're not going to win the MAC, so I think they basically have reached their season goals, man. Buffalo, I think they were really bad last year, so they're back to a bowl this year. I think that was their aim this season, so that is actually a big win, man. And maybe they're a little bit tired out because they went into overtime, even though arguably they should have won this game more easily, but they're only a 3.5-point favorite when the game went off. So Buffalo, they don't have that much left to play for in the season, man. Their senior night, their final home game is next week against Kent State, which should be an easy win for them. But they just got bowl eligibility, so that's their goal. Like I said, you could be in letdown mode after that. You might not totally pay attention to Eastern Michigan in here. And on Eastern Michigan's side, oh, look, they're sitting at 5-5. They need one more win to become bowl eligible, man. So I think Eastern Michigan, their goal is right there. You win this game and you become bowl eligible. And Eastern Michigan got into a bowl last year. And I think that was the first time in a while that this program made a bowl. So that was a big deal for Eastern Michigan, and I think it is a big deal again. It's still their goal. We want to get back to a bowl again this year. So I think Eastern Michigan's going to be focused here, and it's senior night for them. It's their final home game of the year. It's the day that you celebrate your seniors. They probably know they're not going to win this game at Western Michigan, even though Western Michigan's defense sucks. I mean, that's a game where their offense is probably just too formidable for Eastern Michigan here. So Eastern Michigan, I think they're going to want to win this game, and they're hosting a national TV game, which they don't do very often, although in the MACtion slate they do, but this is the only time they're doing it this season, man, because the only other midweek MACtion game they had was last week at Ohio, and that was on the road. So this is the only game this season where they're hosting a nationally televised kind of isolated game like this. So this is a big game for Eastern Michigan for a bunch of reasons. So give me Eastern Michigan, man. It's all about the spot. I know Eastern Michigan, they can't run the ball quite as well, although they've had some decent rushing performances in there. Their offense, not really a pushover, and they should be able to get something done against Buffalo. So give me Eastern Michigan. Total in this one's down from 52 to 51.5, though. 65% of the tickets, 75% of the cash on the over, though. So I would maybe look to the over here, but the problem is that the wind, for both of these games, the wind might kind of hurt these passing attacks, man. And both of these teams do throw the ball, so although Buffalo does run the ball a bit as well. But that might kind of hurt the over in that one. And then right before I get out of here, Ohio and Toledo. This is the bigger game. I don't have a play on this one. Toledo's down from 3-1. 62% of tickets, 75% of the cash. On the Ohio side. I agree with the market indicators on this one. The line is moving to Ohio, and the cash percentages on Ohio. I agree with it. The total's down from 51 to 45, with 74% of tickets, 87% of the cash on the over. But the line has moved quite a bit, and again, I think it's because of extreme wind. But it looks like for some reason it's happening. It's dropping the total more in this one than in the other game. I don't know exactly why, but this game does have better defenses than the other game does, which should be obvious anyway because the total is way lower. But for this game, I mean, Ohio, they got their goal right in front of them, man. They got to win these games, and they're going to get into the MAC championship, and that is their goal here. They missed out on it last year, and one of the teams that got in was Toledo. I'm pretty sure it was Toledo and Miami, Ohio in the MAC title game last year. This is a big game for both teams, though, because it's an Ohio rivalry, but I think it's bigger for Ohio because Toledo has kind of had the upper hand over them the last couple of years. Ohio, they've been doing pretty well offensively since they switched back to Navarro, but it was against Buffalo, Kent State, and Eastern Michigan, so take from that what you will, but those are all bad defenses. But Navarro, I mean, he's a dual threat quarterback too, so he gives them an added dimension, so they are better with him in there, but they are stepping up in class against this Toledo defense a little bit here. But Ohio, they're looking at the MAC title game, man, whereas Toledo, I don't think they can get into the MAC title game, man. Them and Buffalo, I mean, I think technically they're not eliminated from it, but I think they know they're probably not going to be able to do it because they really are going to have to leapfrog. They're going to have to leapfrog multiple teams there. The three teams that are sitting at 7-1 there in 5-1 in conference. So I think they know they're not going to be able to do it. Toledo, I mean, they're coming off a couple of easy games against Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan. They probably should have won the Eastern Michigan game a little bit more easily. This Toledo offense actually hasn't been that good this year, though. Under Gleason, the rushing attack really isn't that good. They can really only throw the ball. But this is senior night for them, so that's the one thing that maybe Toledo will be motivated because it's their final home game. They're hosting a game on ESPN2, although they did host a midweek game last week as well. But this is a big Ohio matchup, so that's the one thing that gives me a little bit of pause. But if you're taking Ohio, you are taking the offense that has more dimensions to it. Toledo a little bit one-dimensional as they can only throw the ball. Like I said, Ohio, dual-threat quarterback, can run it a little bit better. More dimensions on offense, and Ohio may actually arguably be the better defense as well. So lean to Ohio on that. But my one play, once again, is Eastern Michigan -1. That's going to do it for me. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow the Tower Gang Podcast, patreon.com/Tower Gang, live pre-show, post-show. Hang out with us in the Telegram, and we will be with you tonight, 9-11 p.m. Eastern, Tower Gang Wednesday, baby. Come hang out in the chat with us. Peace. Have a good one, guys.